Saying good morning to everyone as you are joining the meeting this morning. We hope you had a good weekend. We are just demonstrating and showing our commitments to students in foster care by introducing yourself in the chat as you join and writing down any or all of those commitments for students in foster care. So welcome on in. We're going to get started in just a minute. It's so great to see everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar and meeting and our program update today. If you're just joining in, we invite you to say hello in the chat box and also show a commitment that you have this school year for students in foster care in your school or agency. So welcome everyone. We're glad you're sharing your morning with us for our program update. So again, this is the Education for Students in Foster Care Mid-Year Program Update. And thank you for joining us. We're going to do a little introduction and tell you about what we're going to be talking about during our meeting this morning. So here we go. So in the first part of our program update this morning, we are going to be sharing just that, program updates. So we're going to be talking about highlights from our 23-24 school year school foster care point of contact survey. We're also going to be reminding everyone and sharing information about our new Educator's Guide resource, some information about Act 1 technical assistance support, and also information about new federal non-regulatory guidance for students in foster care placement. So that's going to be part one of our program update this morning in our webinar. And then later on in our check-in today, we're going to have a little bit of a more informal open office hour where we listen to your responses to some questions that we have prepared in advance and hopefully share some best practices and also discuss strategies for addressing challenge areas that you are having as well. So just a little introduction if we have not been acquainted yet so far. My name is Matt Butensky. I'm a project manager at the Center for Schools and Communities, and I am also the foster care point of contact for the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And my colleague Ben is also here with me today. And Ben, please introduce yourself.
Hi, y'all. My name is Ben Simmons, and I am fortunate to get to work with Matt closely on a number of our projects, namely being education stability for children and youth in foster care. So we're looking forward to our presentation together today.
Thanks, Ben. And like we said, we're glad you're here for our mid-year program update. And if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat already, please say hi in the chat, just so we can all kind of reflect on who's in the room this morning, if you're from a school district or you're from a child welfare agency or another organization that supports the education of students in foster care placement. So welcome on in. Also, likely, if you're here today, you probably should or might want to be in our statewide directories. So many of you are identified as an education liaison or school foster care point of contact, but we also have room in our directories for supporting colleagues that also would like to receive information about our events and other information that we share about the program Education Stability for Children and Youth in Foster Care in Pennsylvania. So take a look today if you haven't in a while. If there's any updates to the directories, we can make those updates for you. You would just contact us, and our contact information is available in the slides earlier and later before we wrap up today. So with that, the first program update we wanted to share with you more about was our survey highlights for our 23-24 school year foster care point of contact survey. So these are insights from many of you on our call this morning from the 23-24 school year. We hold this survey every year for school foster care points of contact. And It's really a great way for us to look at the implementation of the Title I Part A foster care requirements under the Every Student Succeeds Act. So see how implementation is going in your school district or in your charter school regarding students in foster care. And in the 23-24 school year survey, we had 374 local education agencies completed. So Ben is going to give us a much thorough overview and share some of those highlights so you can help compare or contrast what the work looks like in your agency. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, we definitely saw a wide breadth of experience working with students in foster care across the state. And I don't think that comes as any surprise. As Matt had said, we are representing over half of all the LEAs in Pennsylvania, and those, of course, often are very engaged with their students in foster care. So according to our surveys, and I do want to make the caveat that this is all voluntary data that is shared and may or may not be as formal compared to another LEA's procedures. However, at minimum, we're looking at a total of 6,000 students at the time of the survey being served in the previous school year. So that is a huge impact on our students. From 0 at some LEAs to almost 3,000 at one LEA. So lots of expertise across all of that. We also wanted to note the average per LEA is 19 students in foster care, receiving services or being educated at a local education agency. Now, significant steps were taken to ensure school stability. So we're looking at 94% of LEAs who reported working with students in foster care also participated in best interest determination meetings. That being said, there's still a little margin for error. That's pretty good to us. The average number of bids per LEA or best interest determination is 14. So if we think back to that previous number of 19 being the average students enrolled in foster care per LEA, that is a significant majority of those students who are participating or whose benefactors are participating in the best interest determination. 93% of LEAs who participated in those bids also provided or arranged transportation. And in 53% of those cases, additional costs were reported. We also want to note in that vein of transportation and its effect on school stability, the top reason for a school change is the distance from the school of origin, that representing over 60% of the predominant reason for school change. And 94% of LEAs took steps to ensure immediate enrollment. So this was a new metric for us. We really wanted to zero in on what enrollment and participation is like for your students in foster care, just to see all of those actions that you're taking in a more global lens. So 94%, almost all LEAs were working to ensure immediate enrollment. And the time from enrollment or time until participation, when that school change occurs, the vast majority being seeing participation within 36 hours. And very rarely is a student not participating in the school in which they're enrolled or the best interest determination is made that they should enroll. less than 1%, so almost statistically negligible. So we're really happy to see these numbers, and in some cases where there's an extended period, we also allowed for space to explain what might be happening, which also gives us great insight into what's happening in your daily work life. Of course, common enrollment delays, these are not going to or may not come as a huge surprise to you if you've been in your role for a while. However, common enrollment delays listed were transportation challenges, whether that was providing or arranging it, communication delays between agencies and also between schools, and the third most prominent being course placement or the required services not immediately available. So we see a lot of those similar steps that are being taken to immediate enrollment, or connecting these to those possible reasons for enrollment delays, kind of manifesting here and seeing what we can continue to work on as a state and what supports are necessary locally to overcome these, specifically with course placement or immediate required services and communication delays. Those can all be connected to one another. We also asked you and your statewide colleagues to provide us with some best practices or promising practices, and offer a little expertise from what they're doing. So we're going to share a few of those, being just coordinating meetings and including a set aside time specifically for conducting best interest determination meetings or check-ins with county agencies, area schools, and other common stakeholders. So that's an exciting one that we're happy to see is given time. Also, just building relationships between neighboring local education agencies and their points of contact and county agency education liaisons. So not just looking immediately in your locality, but taking some time and introducing yourself to a network where your students may come or go. Also using a secure shared spreadsheet, which is accessible to key personnel. We've got those listed here. Just knowing that information and your tracking of your students' progress and success and enrollment is happening. It's always great. Of course, we have our, we provide a template. However, you're free to create one that's more appropriate for you. And the final best practice that we saw was conducting school-based team meetings to monitor your student in foster care's progress and then address those challenges head on. Now, in full transparency, we want to share how we use these results, because you as our points of contact take a lot of time and really give these responses time and effort. So we want you to know that we continue to work and implement those and sort of take out from your experience how we can improve guidance and practices. So we inform targeted, or your responses inform targeted improvements. So that's identifying specific challenges and potential growth opportunities at the local level. We also look for data-driven decisions, or make data-driven decisions. So your feedback provides a factual basis for any adjustments and resource allocations. This enhances accountability, tracks our progress in connecting with you, and gives you a way to see your year-over-year progression in the education of children and youth in foster care. And finally, it facilitates collaboration. Just like in times like this, it encourages best practice sharing among districts, LEAs, and other supportive agencies. So we really appreciate the time that you take and the responses and candor that you give.
And before we
Now,
move on, I just
yeah.
wanted to make a few comments.
Mhm.
So, like Ben said, thank you for taking the time to take the survey. But again, we just also want to thank you for your work to make these things happen. I hope and we hope that sharing these results demonstrate that we're making a lot of progress in Pennsylvania towards school stability and helping and assisting students in foster care, certainly from where we started. So just continue working together and collaborating. We know that this is complicated work that involves a lot of different people, but again, just thank you. And we will be having another survey. It happens annually, as many of you have come to expect. So it will release towards the end of this school year in May, and then you'll have several months to complete it. So if you did not complete the survey last year, please be aware that we will be asking for it to be completed again this school year, reflective. So thanks again, Ben. Go ahead.
So in that vein of working to enhance the resources and support that we can give, um, we have developed an educator's guide, knowing that our students in foster care face really complex trauma and there are a lot of barriers. That's why we have legislation that offers some stability, but a lot of that stability and security comes from the relationships that are formed with educators and other school staff. So we have worked to, and I pause to call it like a comprehensive guide because it's not. But we have developed the beginnings of a foundation for educators and school staff, as well as points of contact, to build those supportive relationships. Best practices for our in-school support are listed. We've also given tools that enrich the school experience for students in foster care. So this is all based in it's evidence-based, that those supportive relationships, the positive supportive relationships built at school, long-term promote self-efficacy of students and yield higher academic outcomes as well as overall life outcomes. So this is a critical part of the work, the social work, that we wanted to give you one start to a toolkit. So that's our educator's guide for working with and educating children and youth in foster care. We've got that available here online. Another exciting shout out, Matt and I and a couple colleagues here at the Center for Schools and Communities will also be providing overall technical assistance for Act 1 of 2022. So not just relating to work with students in foster care, but also students experiencing homelessness and students with experience in the juvenile justice system. So we will be providing on-demand or scheduled training, all virtually. So you have that added flexibility if you'd like to inform administrators or other staff. We're happy to provide that. We'll also be providing guidance on graduation planning. We're working currently kind of in its infancy, but we've got a graduation plan template that we're looking forward to releasing with the support of the Pennsylvania Department of Ed. We're also going to provide sample policies and best practices to make this a little easier for you to formalize and work to support students with a little pre-planning. And not finally, but finally on this list, we'll also be working to create credit assessment tools as well as um, alternative assessment guidelines and rubrics. So please, for right now, we ask that you send Act 1 support at csc.csiu in email, or either of the two of us. We're happy to field that as well. Shortly, you'll see our webpage launched, and all of you should receive the email about that as well. So we're excited to take on a whole new dynamic for our students in foster care.
Thank you, Ben. So now we are turning our attention over to non-regulatory guidance, our federal non-regulatory guidance for students in foster care placement, which has really guided our work since 2016 under the Every Student Succeeds Act. And it's sort of hard to believe that we are approaching 10 years of ESSA in 2025. So with this new non-regulatory guidance that has been released at the federal level, it's a great time to tune up our work and review priorities, set new goals. And we started our session about making commitments for students in foster care. So continuing that and making achievable commitments for the students that we serve. So we're saying happy birthday, ESSA. And we are excited about the possibilities with the new updates to federal guidance. So if you're not familiar or have not heard, the U.S. Departments of Education and Health and Human Services issued new joint non-regulatory guidance in November of 2024. And it's important to note a few things about the non-regulatory guidance and the issued non-regulatory guidance. It does not replace the prior guidance that we have. It really builds on our previous guidance by offering key updates, clearer definitions, more suggested timelines for implementation. So it's not a replacement of work we have already been doing, but it is an expansion of that. And as you are probably reading on the slide right now, the new guidance is over 50% larger than the guidance that we have in 2016. So there's a lot of good stuff in that new guidance that we have. So it does not replace our previous guidance, but it builds on it. And it's also important to note that non-regulatory guidance does not mean a change in statutory law. So there are not legal changes. There were not legal changes to the Every Student Succeeds Act. And so this is joint non-regulatory guidance. But I do want to, again, emphasize that it was completed jointly by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So just like our work in Pennsylvania has really been about collaboration between educators and child welfare professionals and schools and agencies, that is really mirrored at the federal level and at the state level, and then also at the regional and local levels as well. In that issuance, that it is a joint guidance document. So if you haven't had a chance to receive a copy of that at this point, you can scan that QR code to just find the document and start to become a little bit more familiar with the updates to the non-regulatory guidance. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what our roadmap and planning in Pennsylvania is regarding the implementation of the joint non-regulatory guidance. But if you're looking for sort of a nuts and bolts summary of what that large document is, it's 70 some pages, you can find highlights and a little bit longer of a comprehensive summary of it right now from the American Bar Association's Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. So many of you are familiar that we have been working with the ABA Legal Center. You've met many of them at our trainings in person and online. Some counties are also familiar working with them on the Education Barriers Project or the Permanency Barriers Project, and schools working in that capacity as well. So we really lean into our partners at the ABA frequently on this work. And so you can grab those highlights or that comprehensive summary by scanning the QR code. We'll also try to put them in the e-blast or in the chat box when we have a moment as well, so you can grab the link. Okay, so what are some of the updates to the non-regulatory guidance? So today, for the purpose of our program update, we're not going into all the nuts and bolts of what those updates or changes or possible improvements look like. We're really just kind of setting the scene of what types of information are addressed in the updated non-regulatory guidance. So of course, our work has been guided under the Title I educational stability provisions, and that section of the guidance is significantly expanded in the update to the document. Also expanded is information around data collection and reporting. I don't anticipate that that means a whole lot of changes for you, but it is an expansion of the non-regulatory guidance. Brand new to the guidance are all new sections on ensuring academic success, special populations, and funding. So, we have been trying to ensure school stability, but I think we've always had the intent of really improving academic outcomes, right? For years, myself and Ben and our other partners have been sharing about the disproportionate academic outcomes for students in foster care placement and graduation rates. And so, really, our goal is to increase those academic outcomes and increase school success for students in foster care. So, the new guidance does outline a lot more information about that component, which is really complementary to the Title I school stability provisions. There's also information about special populations. We know that a lot of students in foster care have also experienced homelessness. They have also sometimes involvement with the juvenile justice system. They have other unique needs that affect other populations of students in our schools and in our agencies. So that's also included in the new guidance. And then also a section on funding. We have been talking about funding strategies for years, but this is also expanded, or new, I should say, in the non-regulatory guidance. So when we think about our roadmap and planning in Pennsylvania to really take a hard look and implement the new guidance, at the state level, we're really focusing on the first section at the onset. So that first section would be those Title I educational stability provisions. So the new guidance does provide expanded information on a lot of the core elements of our work. So school of origin, foster care definition, the role of the foster care point of contact in the school, information about best interest determinations, transportation strategies, and then immediate enrollment and records transfers, and also resolving disputes. So the new guidance offers expanded information in all of these core elements of the Title I school stability provisions, and that's going to be what we are tackling first when we think about rolling out possibilities of new updates or best practices for the new non-regulatory guidance. So what does our roadmap and planning look like in Pennsylvania with this release of the new guidance in November of late last year? So, so far, the Department of Education and the Department of Human Services in Pennsylvania and the Center for Schools and Communities have been meeting monthly to plan for the rollout of the new guidance. We will also be working closely with the 8 regional foster care education offices. Some of those staff are on our call this morning. Hello, regional offices, and also the DHS OCYF regional offices will also be involved in the collaboration and implementation of the non-regulatory joint guidance. What you can expect sometime soon is a Dear Colleague letter that will be received by your school or agency. We'll be sending it out, but it also will be likely sent to administrators in your organization. So stay on the lookout for a Dear Colleague letter sometime this spring. And we also have some other things in the near future in development, which is a joint webinar between ourselves at the Center for Schools and Communities and PDE and DHS. That will be sometime, hopefully later this spring. And also a highlights summary is also in development, similar to what the ABA has put out, but a joint guidance highlights summary with those high-level overview of the guidance and implementation in Pennsylvania. want to really emphasize this point, and that is that the implementation of the new guidance is really going to improve school stability and academic success for students in foster care in Pennsylvania. So this is a really great thing that we have the new guidance as uh, a way to kind of build momentum and place a new revised and refreshed emphasis on this work here in Pennsylvania. And also, a lot of the updates to the guidance are things that we're already doing in Pennsylvania. We talked about earlier the great work that you're doing as a result, and we can see in the survey that you complete. And so a lot of this work is already taking place. We've always been talking about having timely best interest determinations and enrolling students in school, and not just enrolling, but making sure that they're participating in school. So a lot of these things have been happening already. So we just wanted to emphasize that point that a lot of this won't look like new or surprising information. It's work that we're already doing in Pennsylvania because we've set the bar high. So talked a little bit about what's coming in the next couple months, so that Dear Colleague letter, a joint webinar, and also a highlight summary. But what are we thinking about coming down the pike in later months and over the next year? ESSA, we said it's ESSA's birthday, 10 years. And so we're thinking about how we can really use momentum right now to make improvements over the next year around school stability. So we're going to be having some stakeholder collaboration. We know the partners that we work with in this work, so we plan to bring them in for the new tools and guidance that are released, and that includes you. We want to collaborate with all of you as well about what you need in order to make improvements for school stability and academic success for students in foster care. We are going to be taking a hard look at existing tools and resources that we already have. We've already inventoried everything that we've created since 2016. I've actually been the point of contact since 2016. So I've been along the journey with many of you on the creation and development of those tools. And so we're taking a hard look at what types of updates need to be made to reflect the updates to the non-regulatory guidance. We will also be working on and issuing a revised statewide guidance document. So some of you are familiar with about a 4 or 5 page guidance document that we have. We're looking at creating a new guidance document that really reflects fully the new non-regulatory guidance. We've also been thinking about new tools to support the implementation and support our work. So earlier this year, we have been meeting with all of the regional foster care offices and actually talking county by county about what would be helpful to really improve school stability for students in foster care. And so we have several new ideas, but we also want to get ideas from you about what some new tools and resources might look like for your work. Some of our ideas right now include creating a local template that really helps you map out your local best interest determination process. Another idea is a resource form to have you collect information from students so that their views are always represented and included in the best interest determination process. So just some kind of early ideas of new tools and resources that might be coming. Right now, we're focusing, as I said, on the Title I school stability provisions, but the new guidance includes those expanded or new areas as well. So ensuring academic success, improving academic outcomes, special populations, funding, et cetera. So we do plan on having additional webinars later in 2025 to include those new guidance areas. And also transportation plans. So many of you have created transportation plans back in 2016, 2017, 2018, and a lot of you have updated them over the years, but we want to make sure that everyone in Pennsylvania has an up-to-date current transportation plan. So we do plan to have a transportation plan review campaign later this calendar year that will be working with school districts to ensure that their transportation plans are up to date and reflect the latest and greatest best practices from the new non-regulatory guidance. So stay tuned for information about a transportation plan review campaign. Finally, we wanted to talk about some upcoming events that we have before we go into our next section to hear from you. And we have a upcoming webinar on Monday, I don't think that's March 3rd, Ben. Is it? I think it's Monday, March 10th.
Yeah,
Monday, March 10th.
you're
Just seeing
correct.
that, yeah. So we have a webinar on reducing the abuse to prison pipeline for students with foster care experience on Monday, March 10th at 11 a.m. But whether, so ignore March 3rd, it's March 10th, but you can go ahead and register by scanning the QR code now. And then we also have a few other webinars coming up in March from our companion programs through the Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness program, and also our Center for the Promotion of Social and Emotional Learning. So if you're looking for some professional development to have yourself or share with your colleagues, we have some events coming up in just a few weeks. All right, so we have just gone through all of our program updates, and I'm going to check the chat box to see if I missed anything, if there were any initial questions already. But we're now want to hear from you. And part of our check-in today is really to check in with you about how things are going throughout this school year so far. And so Ben is going to lead us off into our first question for all of you. We hope you can participate in the chat box. Everything will be over chat. We don't have any polls. Everything will be just type in the chat box. So Ben, do you want to get us started with our first check-in question today?
I would love to. So we are looking just for your report on how things are going. So in the chat box, give us a 1 for if things are could be better. You feel like some more support or resources may be helpful. 2, if you've seen a few successes, but you want to push yourself or your program or your results. Or 3, if you are absolutely thriving. And I see a lot of 3s already. So things are running smoothly, you're seeing positive outcomes. And most importantly, for all of these, we want to know what your capacity looks like. So making sure that you might be seeing positive outcomes, but you're also taking care of yourself and able to fulfill all of your duties. So lots of 2s and 3s. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for your candor.
I don't see any 1s, which is either a good sign or they don't want to say they're having a 1 experience. And this is a safe zone. So we understand that there are challenges. So, please feel free to answer honestly at all times.
And if it is a 1, you can separately reach out to either or both of us or your regional points of contact to start addressing those struggles and getting the support that you need. So great.
So I was going to say, Ben, so with those that have answered 2 or 3, would anyone like to unmute themselves just to give a little more commentary on, where is that middle ground that you're having this school year? What could be improved? Or if things are really going well, share some of those successes with us too. So I'm just going to invite anyone to unmute themselves to give a little share out.
And just to let everybody know, in the chat, struggles are with transportation. Again, understood that is a place to really focus, and that you put a lot of attention. So yeah, that can definitely be an impediment. So looking for guidance with or on students who have immigrated and are in foster care. Um, I believe, and I may be conflating in the guidance, Matt, but is there specific guidance for students who are immigrants in foster care in the new non-regulatory guidance?
There is not. There was recently a training that I think I have a slide deck on that we did not host, but we are looking at bringing that to our fall conference or in a webinar format later this year. So stay tuned on that, as we know that that has been a topic
Yeah,
um, in recent times for sure.
definitely. Well, thanks for centering that too. And we definitely want to make sure that all students are able to exercise their right to a free and appropriate public education.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm seeing Gina's comment about the BID process,
mm,
but regional coordinators are helping to get the BID done, which is great. And I think that's also something we have to remember about the best interest determination. If we know that communication can sometimes be tricky, scheduling is tricky, but if somebody picks up the ball, along the way, if there are challenges, so if we're not hearing from one organization, having the school look up who to coordinate for the BID. It's really about that collaborative process. All of our work kind of ebbs and flows of how crazy a day is. I'm not even going to say a week because I know everyone's days can really, your day can really depend on how crazy or your ability to get things done. So really just having anyone help out. But we're hoping that we had mentioned a new tool about mapping out the best interest determination process locally, and a lot of you have placed that information in your transportation plan, but we'd really like uh, counties and schools to talk locally about your very formal and identified mechanism for the BID process locally. So we know kind of how it should happen, but really locally just prescribing what is going to be the process, who's going to contact who's going to do what during that BID time.
and hopefully, Matt, there are a few mentions of some inefficiencies or lack of knowledge in the best interest determination process. Um, so specifically identifying who's responsible for what, as Matt had said, we really want to support that formalization of what that relationship looks like.
Mhm.
Also, just trying to get things scheduled is a challenge. So again, going back to that best practice that we shared earlier, general set aside time just for all stakeholders to come together, like predetermined. I know when you have a lot of people joining, that's a challenge. But identify who
Yeah.
needs to be there, and welcome any further support.
Yeah. Yeah, that is challenging, and I could see how setting aside time would help for some and not other
Mm,
agencies or schools. But how we mentioned thinking about how to capture information from youth so that they participate in the BID, maybe thinking about a way that your core participants could be there, but a way for you to really capture information from other parties and bring that to the BID. We know that the core participants of a BID should be the local school districts and also the child welfare agency and perhaps the education decision maker. But if you're able to somehow capture information and input formally in some type of form or other way that doesn't require their physical participation in the meeting, that might be something to consider. Yeah, I'm seeing about the immigration information. If
mhm.
anyone wants that slide deck, Tina and Noelia, if you want to just email me, I could forward you the slide deck. Again, I haven't reviewed it. It was offered by an external party, but I'm happy to forward that to you if that would be something of interest. Yeah, I see that. Yes, that is a concern, Noelia, and a real problem. Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on to the next question, Ben.
So next, and this kind of applies to your specific role, but as a school point of contact, we're looking for this to kind of be your glimpse into the other side. And same for county children and youth education liaison. So, what do you want to or need to know from your CCYAs or in general, the county agencies regarding the education of children in and youth in foster care? And conversely, as a CCYA education liaison or any caseworkers, anyone involved with children in foster care, what do you need or want to know from schools on their education of children and youth in foster care? So I'll give you a moment to reflect. Please type in the chat box. I know that's a big question, but you're also welcome to unmute and please respond to anyone who lists a question if you have an answer. So our first question is who the EDM will be, and let's see, I guess so who will the EDM be, and a request to have documentation available that mentions that specific person. So how to involve the EDM. Okay. And being sure that the assigned caseworker is in touch with the school and meeting with them to ensure a successful transition. So it sounds like just connection with those caseworkers, Mark, and being sure that that transition, when it's necessary, is comfortable for a student or as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. And just to add on to what Mark had put in the chat, where things are most successful is when schools and agencies have a set aside time. This is obviously an individual student, but when they meet quarterly or twice a year or at the beginning and end of the school year or some type of format, just to kind of become more familiar with the contacts, it's really helpful when you're trying to build a relationship, so that way you can maintain that consistent communication throughout the school year, but then also work on individual student cases as well. So,
and just to let everybody know, Tina is echoing requests for information on the education decision maker, available school records, and any education or health evaluations and IEPs when those are relevant. So yeah, definitely relying on your counterparts to get that information and quickly. So court documentation and any ongoing court proceedings. So that's definitely something that we see could be beneficial. That's okay. It's okay, Parker. You're excited about it. Reunification goals and the goals of placement. So yeah, definitely seeing a lot of whether that's formal records requests or just kind of the product of a conversation with your counterparts at the other agencies.
other things,
yeah.
let's see. We have some districts say they don't have any transportation options. So, saying you don't have a transportation option is not really an option. Availability of transportation is not, we understand that there could take time to have a longer plan in place, but transportation is a requirement if it's determined to be in their school of origin. So I don't know, Julie, what the situation is, if in this case you're the school of origin or it's a school district of, or if you're the school district of foster care residents. But really, we look at the school of origin, having to make sure that the student, if it's determined that they should stay in their school of origin, the school of origin needs to make sure that they can get to school. I did see another comment about the court documents. And so, yeah, so schools cannot require a court order, but the agency should be providing a letter or notification using the school notification form that DHS has created that agencies may use that give information that I believe they are looking for. So, who the EDM is, things of that nature. Those other items that Barbara was mentioning.
Definitely, just like Catherine says, getting details on your student, getting to know them, and understanding what they may need. Okay, ask for a placement letter. Huh. I would think the notification, as long as it's up to the county agency to draft their own notification of foster care placement. We of course have a template available and recommend that, but that is up to the county agency. However, it should contain all the same and relevant information. So anything further wouldn't be necessary. So once that initial notification and communication has that information, of course, there's follow-up and the scheduling of the best interest determination if necessary. But that notification letter should be kind of synonymous with the notification or placement notification.
The form is on our website, pafostercare.org.
And someone from just uplifting another county agency, information that's great is an IEP, general feedback on their performance in educational settings, the supports they need, and concerns with as far as school placement goes. So that's great to hear. As you may have a student who's exiting enrollment and experiencing a school change, but I also would imagine that having those records and having that information just makes advocacy for students as a caseworker much clearer.
Love that, Tina. Great practice. Yeah, if you're not, just some general comments before we move on, because I know we don't have that much more time together, but if you're not receiving notifications formally through some type of written documentation, I would really try to reach out to your regional PDE education office. So if you're not sure who that is, and just so we can, see if that's something that we can work with the agency to provide in the future in some way, because it is important that schools have that identification information. I mean, the reason that it's so important that we identify, we want to actually provide schools stability, and then we also want the school to be able to do things like Tina's doing, so that schools can really provide as much support as they can. And so knowing who's in foster care is really important for schools. So having that notification is important. So we can try to work with you on that one. And one other thing, Ben, real quick, because I saw that there were some delays in scheduling meetings. Just keep in mind as a reminder that students should be staying in their school of origin if it's feasible and appropriate during the interim of a best interest determination. So that's why we talked about having a local mechanism for what a BID looks like, is important so that we know, are there short-term transportation options? That should be the first question, the first questions we're asking. If we can't get everyone together to have a bid within, a day or 2 days or 3 days, that way the students staying in their school of origin, and we have an interim transportation plan in place. So in the interim of a full bid, student stays in their school of origin, and we have short-term transportation or school attendance options. We don't want students sitting out of school for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because we can't get everyone on a bid together. So you should have a short-term plan in place during the interim of a best interest determination. Okay, Ben, let's move on. I know we're getting low on time. So I talked earlier a little bit about the updated non-regulatory guidance and its impact on Pennsylvania. So I know you haven't had a lot of time to digest what I shared, but if you have any immediate questions about the non-regulatory guidance or its impact, please put them in the chat box. We don't necessarily need to address those today together, but it's important for us to be able to reflect on that after our webinar to see what information you're thinking about. So maybe you've been thinking about the new non-regulatory guidance prior to today. You have a few questions already prepared, but feel free to put that information in the chat box regarding the non-regulatory guidance. Bye, Tina. Keep fighting the good fight, yes. And she has a bid. Thank you. And Janice as well.
And just to kind of continue that, as everybody's thinking about the non-regulatory guidance, or if you have questions or a wish list that you'd like to share in the chat or unmute, I also want to open up some space for you to just broadly share anything that's working well for you. So as you know, the cornerstone of this work is providing school stability. So we really want to target what's working locally and how those can be replicated, or we can amplify your positive experience and your students' positive experiences everywhere. So if you have any best practices specific to the pillars of education stability, being best interest determinations, transportation practices, and immediate enrollment, we definitely encourage you to share those now, just in our last couple minutes together. Or if you want someone else's best practice, you definitely
well, let's give everyone a
that.
second to think. We don't have much time, but let's give everyone a moment before we wrap up.
So Melissa, if transportation is the issue, they at her LEA offer paying the family to drive them until transportation is set up. So that is a really effective, immediate transportation stopgap plan. So yeah, definitely a little bit of paperwork, and that's always, a little bit of paperwork is a lot of bit of the job, and it becomes a lot of paperwork. Yeah, definitely. So private transportation, we know statewide can be a challenge, whether you're in an urban area or rural or suburban. So definitely thanks for sharing. Well, while everybody is sharing the last bits of their best practices, we just want to ask you to stay in touch. So here is our contact information. You can email either of us or the PA Foster Care main email. That can be questions, asks for updates, or again, requests for training.
I am going to very quickly put in the chat the slide deck that some people were asking for earlier, in case you're still here and can grab it.
And to answer your question, Christina, the PowerPoint will not be available, but we will have a recording as well as the transcript. So the file won't, but the presentation today will be.
Yeah, a lot of the information that we talked about today will be coming out in an e-blast within the next couple of weeks. And then we had also mentioned the Dear Colleague letter that would be a separate document regarding the non-regulatory guidance. So you'll get the information in other formats. We are going to send the evaluation through email. So if you're still on, please take that evaluation when you receive it in your inbox with follow-up to today's webinar, meeting, program update, a little of everything. Thank you all. We hope you have a great week. It was nice to spend Monday morning with you. Make it a good week and take care.
Thank you all for your commitment. We'll see you soon.